Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40 plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. I absolutely love chatting with women from all walks of life and from all around the world. Hearing their life stories, their wisdom and their knowledge on a range of topics helps me to become a better woman. And through talking and, more importantly, listening, we can learn so much. Now, I'm sure you've discovered that your life experiences have made you much wiser than you were in, say, 10, 20, 30 years before. And I believe that learning from those who have gone before us is also incredibly important. And today on the podcast, I welcome Marla Letizia, another international guest who hails from Las Vegas in the US. Marla's had a long and diverse career. She was a founder and inventor of the mobile billboard industry in Las Vegas, which I assume would be pretty huge, and also the West Coast, I might add. But as you'll hear during this chat, Marla's passionate about teaching people, and busy parents in particular, how to cook easy, nutritious meals. And Marla currently has a cooking segment on the local CBS affiliate in the US. And after a 40-year broadcast career, she's recently received a Lifetime Achievement Award. Marla's also currently working with US company Optum Healthcare to inspire their members to live with purpose and vitality and explain how nutrition plays a significant role in longevity. Now in her 70s, Marla shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. She's on a mission to help those in her generation already living past their midlife and into what she calls a long life era, how attitude and nutrition can impact vitality and energetic balance. Now, Marla believes that sharing the wisdom of our long life with others helps to increase our purpose and energy and extend our life expectancy during that era of our lives. The good news is that Marla shares that the long life era can be both exhilarating and intimidating, and a time for us to become fully comfortable in our own skin. That sounds all great news to me. I really do hope that when we're in our 70s, we all have as much energy, passion, and purpose as the lovely Marla. Big welcome to you, Marla. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. Now, you are going to be coming on with a different accent, so people are going to think, where in the world is Marla from? So, Marla, you tell us all where you're coming from today.
Oh, I love to be able to say this. Honestly, I am from Las Vegas, Nevada. And I can tell you, if I were from any other city in America, no one would know the city, but everybody in the world knows Las Vegas, right?
It's exactly true. So people have a
Yes.
mental image now exactly where you're coming from.
Yes, yes. And I'm so pleased to be here. And Jo, I really want to say I knew you from before you started a podcast. I knew you when you were starting your business, and to see that you have recorded 35 and posted 35 podcasts now. You're doing them one a week, is that correct?
That's right.
One
Yes.
per week.
Yes.
And that you have 35 under your belt. I just want to say congratulations to you on that. I know it's a big deal. It's a
It
big
is.
deal.
Thank you. When you look back and you go, oh gosh, it's a big commitment, but it's something I love doing. And we're planning right now, 50 episodes isn't too far away. So my podcast editor and I are talking about what we can do as something special to celebrate the 50th episode. So, yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
great. Okay, I'll be listening for sure.
Thanks so much. Well, Marla, I'm really looking forward to chatting you about a number of topics today, including your love of cooking and the business you've had, sharing your knowledge, helping young families to eat better and learn how to cook. But now at 70 years young, you're branching into a new area that's showing older people who you call are in their long life era. That's the term
Right.
that you use. How attitude and nutrition can impact our vitality and energy. So I'd love to know, before we get too far into those topics, where your love of food came from.
Well, it's an interesting story. I actually always say I do not love food as much as I actually love people. And for me, food is a way to bring family and friends together, to gather, to make memories, to celebrate, to sanctify a momentous occasion. And so I am just not as much in love with food as I am with people.
Yeah, so it's
And
a connection side that you love.
it is. It's a connection. It's a connection to family. I think all of us would definitely say that you could be walking through a mall, as an example, and all of a sudden you smell an aroma that, of something cooking somewhere, or, outdoors at a barbecue, and it just hits your senses in a way that you say, oh, that's my grandmother. That smell is my grandmother. That I remember the time when, and it's just a hint of a cooking aroma. And so for me, I feel like my soul will be awakened once I am gone. Yeah. When my grandchildren will just suddenly stop and go, oh, this reminds me of Nanny Buddy. Yeah. And so that is why I do it. I took a deep dive into the love of my children and grandchildren, and that's what brought me to my cooking.
That's so interesting and very true, because the sense of smell is so pervasive, isn't it? You can it'll take you back instantly. An aroma will happen, whether it be food or not, and it'll take you instantly, and you are in that place. I think it's actually one of the last senses to leave a person as they are, transitioning.
Maybe.
I'm pretty
really?
sure that is. Yeah.
You still have your sense of smell, unless you're dying of COVID, in which case you don't have a sense of smell.
Well, yes. May not go down that rabbit hole, but that's exactly right.
It was a joke. At least I have a sense of humor.
And also, Marla, your business of cooking and helping other young families came from something that you struggled with when you were a mother as well. So, and this is, I think, a lot of people will be able to identify with this story you're about to tell. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you, our mutual friend Colette, this is her favorite story. She brings it up constantly when we chat, whether we're, at a bar or whether we're, doing a podcast. But I didn't have the great opportunity of growing up with a mother and in a family where, sitting around the kitchen table every night for dinner was an important thing. Yep. And so when my own children were born, I really wanted to give that to my children. I had this, 50s vision, as Leave It to Beaver vision, of everybody coming through the door, and I would have a meal on the table, and we would sit and we would talk about our day and, have joy at the table. Well, I never had a cookbook, because reading a cookbook was uninspiring to me. Cookbooks in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s were just black type on a white piece of paper with ingredients and directions. Maybe there was a black and white photo. I don't know if you had the Joy of Cooking cookbook in Australia. And even Julia Child's book was just, it was written. There wasn't a lot of visual understanding. And I didn't have the imagination to be able to read a cookbook and translate that into what would be a good meal. So I just tried every night to be creative, and I just wasn't. And as my children got older, they started complaining. Listen, in America, we have smart-ass teenagers. I don't know if you have them in Australia, but
I think
here
they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're pretty pervasive here. And mine were the worst by the time they hit teenage years. And they were insulting, and they were mean, and it was just terrible. And finally one night, believe it or not, I literally said, that's it, I've had it. And I walked out the door and I ran away from home for 3 days, because I just was so heartbroken at how mean they had been about it all. And I was trying so hard. And even my husband said, you're cooking the same thing every night. You can't blame them. And so I always say, don't cry for me. I went to the Bellagio for 3 days, and, I had a lovely time until they swore that they would never do it again. But I came home, and of course the cooking stayed as bad, and the comments stayed as bad, and they went off to college. And they're coming home, and I'm like, like everybody says to their mom, will you make whatever when they're coming home? And I said, what do you want me to make now that you're coming home? And their answer was, could we go out? Could we go out for dinner, Mom, instead? So, you know, sadly, in their life, it never got better.
Yeah.
But I have wonderful children. Our daughter's a judge. My son is, you know, a partner in my husband's company. So I really have wonderful children, even though they were smart Alex when they were teenagers. But what ended up happening is when my granddaughter was born, I had sold my business right before her birth, and I was sitting and feeding her every day. I told my daughter that I would take care of her for her first year because she was a very busy career lawyer and soon to be judge. And every day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Barefoot Contessa, Ina Garten, would come on TV. And I would feed my granddaughter, and I would watch this amazing woman. And I'm a visual learner. So for the first time in my life, I had what I call generational cooking, but it wasn't really with my family. It was with Ina Garten, and who is the Barefoot Contessa. And I learned through watching her every day how to cook. And one night, like maybe a month or 6 weeks after watching her every day, Vegas is a 24-hour town. I woke up at 2 in the morning and I couldn't get that leg of lamb out of my head. And we have 24-hour grocery stores here. And finally, I just couldn't get back to sleep. And I got up, got dressed at 2 in the morning and bought a leg of lamb. And from there, I was hooked, and I just have not stopped cooking since. So that's a story.
Excellent. Oh, well, it's one of those things where you were able to use your story to create something for other people, and they can identify with that as well, because there are some people who are just self-proclaimed, I can't cook, I'm not interested in cooking, and you got them. You understood where they were coming from. So that's a lovely thing to do.
Yes. And speaking of that, Joe, I just really want to say that at a time when the women's liberation movement was coming into fruition, which I lived through, and I was one of the first women in broadcast, first woman in production. I was one of the first women in all levels of broadcast careers here in America, at least in Las Vegas at the time. And I want to say that really what happened is that our mothers, who maybe were tied to the kitchens, even though my mother wasn't, but many of the, you know, our mothers of our generation were, they really said to us, look, when we were yelling, we're burning our bras, they were also yelling, well, burn your apron strings too, because you don't need to be in the kitchen. Go out and have a career that I didn't have the opportunity to have. And so therefore, learning to cook was not generational with their daughters, their sons. And now we have given birth to an entire generation of now what are young adults who don't know how to cook, and they're also not teaching their children how to feed themselves. And so we really have a problem with this. And we need to educate them on what is good food and what really isn't food at all. Because I call it lovingly gas station food, and there's no nutritional value. It's a heart attack waiting to happen food for when these kids get just very little bit older. And there's all kinds of pitfalls. So I'm really committed and passionate about helping young families and helping educate whoever is cooking in those young families how to teach their children to feed themselves. It's important.
It is very important. And we'll touch on some of those things that you just raised as well, Marla, a little bit further in our conversation, because they are just as valid in Australia as they are in the States. And I'd say in just about every particularly Western country that there is.
Yes. And I don't know about Australia, you can tell me, but there are insecticides that are outlawed in Europe, like glyphosate, that cause gluten intolerance, that we still use here in America. Yes.
Now, Marla, you have entered what we talked earlier about your long life era. You reached a big milestone birthday. So how was that for you?
Well, so it was pretty bad for me. And I would say that I have never had an issue with my age my entire life, ever, ever. I I had done a lot of work throughout my midlife. I was very accepting of my age and where I was at. I think that it was Megan Martin in your episode number 31, The Nutritionist, that said that menopause is a natural transition of life, not a disease. And I loved it when she said that on your podcast. It really resonated with me. And because I realized that throughout all of these ups and downs, of course, I had to find my way through hormones and hysterectomies and, whether to inject or not inject, all these different things. But I found my way through it. And I think that you, Joe, working on the midlife mindset is very critical to helping people when they transition to the long life era. So let me, if I may, explain long life era. May I?
Sure. Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
please.
So, I've always jokingly and lovingly said that I was going to live to 120. And I really meant it because I have had energy and vitality. And I think you would agree that I look and have the energy of someone years younger than I actually am. And
Yes.
I just turned 70 in January. But what happened is, as I approached 70, the reality really hit me that even if I live to 120, I am in fact not in my midlife anymore, right? Because 70 plus 70 is 140, and I'm not going there. Or maybe I am. Moses did. So let's see, maybe I can. But at the end of the day, if I'm no longer in midlife, where am I? And if you call me a senior, that is not anything that I can relate to. We call our, over 65 government funded healthcare. It's called Medicare. They show us pictures of people that look like my grandparents. They don't look like me. And there's nothing else being shown us of a role model that represents coming out of your midlife, but still living in your long life era. While we're here, let's live it like we're still in midlife. Let's lean into the long life era, but let's live it and be role models for those that are in their midlife of where you can be. In your midlife, you're working hard and you're working to be at a certain stage of your life. And then you get there and it seems like society wants to say, sorry, we're done with you. And yet in America, we, the baby boomer generation, do you call yourselves a baby, or do you have a baby boomer generation?
I don't know what letter we're up to. We're not baby boomers, so my age demographic, but yeah, I'm not sure you had as the
okay. Well,
I'm not sure what letter it is, Marla. There's too many damn letters.
Okay, well,
letters to describe what
I
my
get to the
generation
X, Y, Z years, I know. But in America, there was a generation that was born right after World War II. And there was a big baby boom in America after World War II.
Yes.
And we are that generation. And this generation of baby boomers is still the largest generation in America because right after us came birth control. So there was not birth control when we were all born, right? And there are still 73 million baby boomers in America at this time. And we are all living, we still have the power of dollars within our pockets. And yet we are being forgotten. And it's sad because when you turn on your TV and you can't identify, that will give you depression. And so the long life era and how we're talking is to lift people up, to remind them that their wisdom is needed, because you can't teach wisdom. You have to share it. You have to share it.
Indeed.
So that's what it is.
That's lovely. So did you feel better once? Was it the lead up to reaching the age of 70 that bothered you? Or are you feeling better within yourself now that you've reached it and you go, right, this is my opportunity to do something else and go in a different direction?
Well, there's a term I once heard, which is sometimes really bad endings are disguises for happy new beginnings. And so what happened for me is that I could feel the ending, the disintegration of the person that I was for the last 25 or 30 years.
Yeah.
But I couldn't put my finger on it, but I really felt it.
Mm.
And it was terrifying to me because I didn't know who to be.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to be 70.
Mm.
And I did feel pushed to the corner, which I'm not a push to the corner kind of a gal, as well, right?
Yeah.
But what happened is, in the midst of trying to figure myself out, I finally took a deep breath and thought, maybe I should just lean into this and see what happens. And that is when everything changed for me.
Mm.
And when I leaned into it, the whole thought and idea of the long life era came to me, and it has been a very new beginning for me. In fact, if anybody's listening and interested, there is a long life era community group on Facebook. And in just 2 weeks, we have 100 members. And in fact, after 20 hours of starting the group, I got invited to be on a radio show to talk about the long life era every Wednesday morning from now on. It's called Wellness Wednesday, and we're talking long life era. So a lot of really wonderful things. A really bad ending was a beautiful new beginning for me.
Oh, that's so lovely. And I think people need to hear those sorts of stories as well. They need to hear that it's normal to feel anxious when there's big milestones coming up or there are changes that are happening. And you need to be able to see, I've said it before in a podcast, you can't be what you can't see. And if you can't see people who are like you or hear people who are like you, you can sometimes feel so alone. And I know when I'm working with women, they love hearing themselves in other people's stories as well, because they no longer feel isolated. And it's important that we talk openly, because in this whole podcast and the work that I do is to give women the skills and the confidence to be who they are in whatever age they are in the middle of life. And you're doing the same for your generation, and showing them that there are so many possibilities. Just because you are a number does not mean that your life has ended. There's there's so much out there to do. It's you can choose the mindset to go with whatever number you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. It's so true. And, speaking of the end, when an end comes, you almost don't identify it. You just feel it coming. You know it's there. And then there's this messy middle.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to find a footing for yourself. And then suddenly you realize that you're in a new beginning. If you can identify the new beginning, then what happens is you begin to get into flow with the world, and you feel centered again, and you feel a synchronicity. And so I think that no matter what age you are, anybody in their early 20s, I think my 20s were the worst decade of my life. But, it's really, they too are coming to an end, because I think in your 20s, you're just an old teenager. You're really not really into that midlife adulthood or early life adulthood. And, you just need to take a leap instead of just staying on the sidelines and feeling safe. And so for me, it was really about, stepping into it and desperately wanting to get back into flow with the world and the synchronicity. And look what happened in 20 hours. I got invited on a radio show weekly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And talking about your broadcast career, you've had a 40-year broadcast career. You've recently received an award for that.
Right, yes.
You've got a cooking segment that you still do on a local CBS affiliate station that you do. Do you experience ageism, particularly being an older woman in the media? Like, is that something that you've found at all? I'd be just interested. I know probably the people that you work with you're well known to them, so maybe it doesn't happen as much. But
they're all in their 20s, right? Most of them. There's a few that are in their 30s. They're probably in early 30s, and I can think of one person that's in his 50s. I think that they identify with me as a grandmother, right? Because the term Nanny Buddy is what my grandchildren called me. But I do have a really fun, happy, positive, peppy, like I've always been a really peppy kid. And I'm a peppy 70-year-old. So
Yeah.
I try to match their energy.
Mm.
Well, I don't feel like an old woman, but I wouldn't try to hide being 70.
Mm.
And I've not had a facelift. I don't know I don't really want to hide. I mean, my dad has had 50 facelifts, honestly, his neck, his eyes, his everything. And he keeps saying to me, he's 86, and he says to me, Marla, this is how he talks. Marla, when are you going to get that neck of yours done? You look like an old woman, for God's sakes. When are you going to do something about that neck? And, and he owns a restaurant, and he says this in his restaurant, like in front of like customers. It's just awful. But anyway, I know that's why I had so much therapy in my midlife, because I had to get over having grown up with this. But anyway, here's the thing. So everybody knows Joe is laughing so hard she's crying right now.
Oh, dear.
But here's the thing, Joe, is that I finally, after the first time feeling hurt, the second time crying, and then having to deal with this, it was like I didn't even want to go to the restaurant anymore because he was going to bring this up. I finally looked at him and I said, Dad, let me ask you a question. If I do something about my neck, do you think my children are going to love me any more than they do already? Or do you think I'll have more friends than what I have now if I do that? Or let me ask you this, because I knew this was important to him. You think I'll make more money if I actually do something about my neck? And he just was stunned. He didn't know what to say. And you know what? He stopped. He stopped asking me about it. And so I like having a youthful vitality and energy while it's still packaged in something that is real.
Yep.
It's packaged in something that's real.
Yeah. I suppose people have got the choice. Your father has a choice whether he wants to keep doing all of, and no judgment to anyone, what they choose to do with their body and how they choose to age, and if they need any, feel like they need for themselves any other enhancements. That's an entirely personal decision. But it's interesting that he got to hear another side. You've lived the side of your father, so you have experienced that, and tell him your story. Yeah.
The problem with him is that he did 10 more than he needed to do, and now he needs, and then he was trying to take it back the other direction.
Okay.
You've seen those, yes.
Yes. So
You've seen those.
I think I've got a mental image right now, actually.
You do. I love this conversation. It's as real as you get, right? It's a very real conversation.
It wasn't where I was expecting to go, but I love that it has. We talk about lifespan versus health span. We kind of touched on that before, because this is one of the main reasons that I got into what I'm doing, because we're living longer, but there's no use in living longer if you're not healthy and you can't take advantage of those years. If you're requiring so many medications, you're requiring so many people to help you in your day-to-day. And it starts now, like it starts for women in their 20s and their 30s, but often they're so wrapped up. But your 40s and your 50s are a really good reminder, because your body gives you those little gentle nudges. And it's so important that we start to take those on board, because, there's a statistic that I read, and I've quoted on the podcast before, Marla, that 80% of women by the time they reach 50 have 2 or more chronic diseases. 2 or more, that's an incredible number. And out of those, that 80%, the World Health Organization says 80% of those diseases are ones that are preventable. So they're lifestyle choices and things that we do in our day-to-day. And that doesn't happen overnight. That happens, from the choices that we make on what we're eating. Are we moving? Are we overly stressed? Are we sleeping well? Are we having those close connections with others? Do we have purpose? What sort of chemicals and things there might be in our food, in our home? All of those things, layer upon layer, will create what our future is going to look like. So your work now is so important on what you're doing. Like what I'm doing, I think is incredibly important, just to, even if it's raising awareness for people, number one. For people then to go the next step and decide they're going to change is the hard part. So what sort of thing are you doing now with the age group that you're working with now? What sort of message are you giving people?
Well, I'll tell you. So I really want to comment on what you're doing, because we really want to help people make that messy middle, right?
Yeah.
Which is that you are giving out information in you're redefining midlife, and you are helping people to understand that heart disease is a foodborne illness, right? I mean, it's crazy to think, but it is. It's a foodborne illness. There's other genetic abnormalities that come about that, are not, but for the most part, heart disease is foodborne, and it's the number one killer of women. Breast cancer also, diet does impact breast cancer as well. But what you're doing is you're saying, I want to help you redefine your midlife. I want to help you if you made mistakes in your 20s, 30s, as you go into this era, in this midlife era that you're in, I want to help you get to your long life era. But what we want to say is, when you get there, you're not going to be flushed down the toilet and ignored. Like, there has to be something over here in long life that they want to live for. And if the discussion around the long life age group is, get in your rocking chair and just watch TV and don't continue to recreate yourself, or don't continue. And here's the main thing. I have had this, Joe. Here's a mic drop. I actually wanted to do something within my own business. And I heard myself say, I'm going to run out of time before I can actually get it to the finish line. So I'm just not going to do it. I'm running out of time in my life. So why try something so new and different? And I really had to grab myself and say, you don't know that. You don't know how much time you have left. And this could happen faster than you've ever thought, or you'll die in the middle of it all. But you don't know, and you never had that thought when you were in your 40s. So why are you having it now? You don't know. You just don't know. So, if you always wanted to go parachuting, go parachuting. If you always wanted to go to South Africa and go on a game safari, then, do it. Don't just say, I can't do anything now because I'm old. Well, you're not. Only your mindset is old. And that's what you're working on, Joe. That's what the podcast here is all about. It's about mindset shift and then an action shift. And so we want people to get to the long life and know that they still have an excitement that they can have and wisdom to share.
So how are you presenting that to the people who are in the long life era? Like, what are you saying to the people who you see on a daily, and how is your business traveling down that direction?
Well, Nanny Buddy is shifted from just a brand and just a cooking brand, but it's shifting into a Nanny Buddy lifestyle brand. I'm doing a lot of writing, a lot of positive writing within the group, and encouraging people. So it's really about engaging in the conversation and being there to support each other in a very positive way.
Yeah, it's great to have people to look, as I mentioned earlier, to that, not that you can aspire to be, but to know that they're in a similar situation as what you are, a similar age, similar life choices, or similar mindset. For women of my age to see that there are other women who are decades older watching the field, that's really inspiring, because I think you leave a legacy. You do leave a legacy behind, and you don't know how large that legacy is going to be, ever. No one ever knows what that will be. It's something that keeps on continuing, but it is so very important. Who are the people that you look up to of your age group, Marla, that you go, damn, she's amazing?
Yeah. So I cannot think of this woman's name, but I have always adored and loved her. She is the only woman in history that has won both a Tony, an Academy Award, and a Grammy or an Emmy, So that's television, movies, and but she's like 92. I wish I could think of her name. She was the star of West Side Story, the movie. She won an Academy Award for that. I wish I could think of her name right now off the top of my head.
I can't help you,
but
sorry.
I know, but she's beautiful and she's gorgeous. She's got beautiful gray hair. She's so sexy in her own, in her own skin. And she says that what has kept her alive and joyful is that every day she looks to give somebody a compliment. If she can bring a compliment to somebody with great joy, it's really amazing, and you can just see all over her. I've always looked at Oprah as somebody that is also a beautiful role model for women, but aside from that, Oprah and I are the same age, and we both applied for the same job at the same time, and she got it and I did not, and that was her talk show in Chicago. And so I didn't like her at first. So I was kind of mad when she got
She was
syndicated.
that woman.
Yeah, she was that woman. And I was like, ooh, what kind of name is that, Oprah? And but once I grew into and understood life and what she was bringing to the world, and I do not think I would have had the courage to bring the heartfelt spirituality to the masses that what she brought. She was a very courageous woman of my generation. And she too is learning to lean in. She's having a hard time too. I can tell in what she's doing. Yeah. She's retired and she is trying to find a place for herself as well. So she is somebody that I definitely look at.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. What do you know now that you wish you knew in the middle of life? So for being an older woman, what would you say to women of my age and women who listen to the podcast?
Well, I do believe that gratitude is everything. And I don't think sometimes that you're grateful for the wonderful things that have crossed through your life, both the good and the bad, because there's so much to be learned from the bad things that have happened in life. When they say that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If you can just find gratitude, like Pollyanna did in the Glad game, if you can look at everything in life, if you can write 10 gratefuls every single day, it will improve your life exponentially. And I think I worried too much. I think I wasn't grateful for even the bad. And I think that it was not until I reached this stage of life that I realized that the biggest mistake I made is that I wasn't 100% in touch with being grateful for all the wonderful blessings I had been given throughout my life. And I have had wonderful blessings. And half of those blessings were things that were taken from me or taken away from me or were hardships, but they made me who I am. Yeah. And if you can stop long enough to truly write 10 blessings, 10 gratitudes every day as part of your meditation, I think you will live to a long and happy and healthy life.
Changes your perspective of things, doesn't it?
Great.
And your brain learns to look for things to be grateful for. It's you have to train yourself. It's not always easy, especially when you are going through something that's particularly hard or tough.
But your soul knows.
Yeah. Oh,
your
yeah.
soul knows, right?
Yeah.
And it just wants your brain to get out of the way so that it can, all you really need to do is connect 1 or 2 days and suddenly a whole new world opens up, and then you want to continue it because you can't live without it.
Yeah. Thank you. So now, Marla, you're never too old and you're never too late is something I believe on a cellular level. Like there's always something there. So now what are you looking forward to at the age of 70? You've just started on this brand new path for yourself. What are you most looking forward to in this decade ahead?
Well, I want to write a book. which I've actually already started. I know that you spoke to in episode 28, Emma Lagerlow, is that her name? And she wanted to write a book too. I really just want to help people have a happy kitchen. That's something that I've looked to do. And I actually have an ebook that's called The Happy Kitchen right now that people can download. It's nannybuddy.com. You'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
slash happy kitchen.
Yes.
And it has spices in it. So every spice that you would need in the history of the spice in order to make just about any recipe. It's got a list of what you need in your refrigerator and a list of what you need in your pantry. And It's a great thing to give to newlyweds or to someone going into an apartment for the first time or new home buyers. And I'd like to take that and expand on that into more of a full happy kitchen idea. And I actually have created this shopping list, which is literally by aisle. And I will tell you that the first time that because this is how I used to do a shopping list. Oh, I need this, write it on the list. Oh, I need that, write it on the list. Oh, so it went from dairy to produce, back to dairy, back to here, there, pantry, cereal, and I found myself with a shopping cart going to this aisle, scratching off the list, that aisle, coming back and going forward. And I mean, it would take me 45 minutes in the grocery store. But I created this shopping list by aisle. You put things on the list by produce, by dairy, by frozen, by a pantry, by alcohol, and then literally, and I did it by a grocery store here in America called Trader Joe's, but it works in any grocery store. But I visualize myself in that grocery store, and it just takes you through a grocery store. And literally, the first time I used that list for a huge party that I was doing, it took me 17 minutes and I was out. So this is a free download. It is nannybuddy.com/Joe, your first name. So that
that's nice.
Yes, and it will be, and it will be there forever. I'm not going to take it down. So if you're listening to this podcast, when she's got podcast number 100 up and you wanted to start listening from the beginning, that link will be live forever and always. So it's nannybuddy.com/Joe, and you can get your free downloaded shopping list. Yes.
Good. Now, Marla, we'll have a wrap-up question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And is, what do you hope, and it usually is 80-year-old, but we're going to go 100-year-old because I have no doubt that you are going to get there, Marla. What is 100-year-old Marla going to say about 70-year-old Marla?
That is a great question, Joe. I love that question. You know what she's going to say? She's going to say, boy, that girl almost kicked it in. She was so terrified and so confused and so sad.
Yeah.
But she leaned into it and she brought something to the world. And she's got a talk show. and she's the new spokesperson for Nike, because Nike's now making shoes for people from 70 to 100, and they're cool, and 20-year-olds and 20-year-olds want them now too. And I'm a spokesperson for all kinds of brands because we are showing the world that we can all live long and happy lives. Parachutes with Nanny Buddy on it.
Love it. Fantastic. Well, Marla, thank you so much. You're a shining light, and it gives us all lots to look forward to as we reach our own long life era, or we leave the midlife, however long that may be for people,
yes.
And to reach and to know that there is so much to look forward to, that it's not doom.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.